Hi, I'm Peter Birch and welcome today. Today we're going to be talking about lizards and the importance of UV lighting, calcium and heat it is for lizards, just like old Grumblebum just here, making sure that these animals grow big, healthy and strong. That's right, big, healthy and strong. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for finding me. Make sure you do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and the notification button so we can all continue to join the adventure. For everyone else, let's find out what makes big, strong, healthy bones just for these lizards like this guy here. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about lizards and the reality that we need to give them exactly what they need to become big, charming, absolute awesome animals. Now, I really think the first 6 months is imperative to the rest of its life of a lizard. Now, some of these lizards, you've got to remember, can live 25, 30 plus years. So it's really important we get that first 6 months really nailed down. And for a reptile keeper, it's very important because when you breed these animals and then you on-sell them, you're really hoping that the people that get these animals are going to do the right thing by them. Now, I really think there's at least 3 to 4 critical things that we need to remember when we're keeping lizards. Number 1 is UV light. Number 2 is heat. And we're not talking about an optimal temperatures, we're talking about preferred body temperatures and maximum body temperatures. So you've got to remember those. And we're also talking about calcium, so we've got to have calcium supplements. Now, the fourth thing that a lot of people don't really think about is hydration. So we're going to make sure that these animals are properly hydrated. Now, how do we do that when a lot of these species, including monitors and some dragon species here in Australia, are desert dwelling species? Now, these guys, you would think that would get hardly an opportunity to get to water on a regular basis, but don't be fooled by that. These guys can burrow, they can search for droplets of dew first thing in the morning on plants. They've adapted very well to survive in some of these harsh environments. So we need to make sure they've got adequate opportunities to rehydrate themselves when we keep them in these hot conditions. Now, we did talk about UV light. So you've got to think of it like a pyramid. So you've got UV light at the top, you got heat, and then you got calcium, right? So UV light can be number 1, the best source of UV light in the world. The best manufacturer is Mother Nature, the sun. If you can get your animals out in the sun to get natural daylight, that is by far the best source of UV light in the absolute universe. Now, you got to remember, an hour of sunlight is better than any artificial light can give them for at least 12 hours. How is that possible? Well, most of these artificial light sources or UV sources that we use, including the Raptor Sun, which is probably one of the better brands out there, 10%. So 10%. That's 10% of what Mother Nature can pump out. That's what this bad boy can do, is 10%. So this is only supplementing 10% of what you can get out there. Now, you got to remember, these animals come out to bask early in the mornings, depending on the species too. So you got to do a bit of homework when you want to keep a different type of lizard. Now, including monitors and things like this, come out first thing in the morning, bask. So they're opportunistic, they suck up as much heat as they can. So they've got to bask in the sunlight in the early morning to get that early morning UV radiation. Number 2, remember we talked about heat. So heat from above, heat from below. Now, there's different things for different animals and people have different methods and different reasons. But let's be honest, the sun's above, it radiates heat down. There's rocks on the ground, the rocks get warm, the animals sit on top of the rocks, get the heat in their belly, which is really good, and they get the heat from above, which also incorporates the radiation of UV light. Now, a lot of lizards do have the old-fashioned third eye still there, a little bit of a remnant, bit of a big word now, a little bit of a remnant of a third eye. Do a bit of homework, guys, you're going to really enjoy that. The third eye. Now, that third eye can actually help thermoregulate and obviously help animals move amongst their home ranges where they can move around and do searching and all that sort of cool stuff. But we're talking about UV light and heat. 2 very important things. The third thing is calcium. Now, out in nature, how do they get calcium? Well, it's quite easy. Very easy. They feed on a wide variety of food items, now including live insects, and we're talking about sometimes whole-bodied animals. So it could be birds, other reptiles, can be fish, can be crayfish, depending on the species, can be mammals, they can be scavengers like monitors like this that'll tear those animals apart and feed on exclusive different parts of the body, or they'll just rip off big chunks and go for it. So calcium comes in many, many different ways. Calcium can be, in most forms, it comes from insects. So the insects do have a natural sort of calcium load. Now you got to remember, phosphorus and calcium is two different things. Now phosphorus is very bad for calcium because it actually draws calcium out of the bones. So if you've got a food item that's very high in phosphorus, that means the calcium is going to be very low. So typically what you want is you want something either equal or something better. Now the best natural form of high level calcium, low level phosphorus is black soldier fly larvae in every form. I believe it's 1.6, so 1 point calcium to 6 points of, 1 point phosphorus to 6 points of calcium. So that is massive. So you can imagine, huge calcium load, very little phosphorus to drag out the calcium out of the bones. Now we're getting really carried away, right? Really carried away. So we need those three things to make strong, healthy bones. We need UV light, we need heat, we need calcium, and without even saying it, and we shouldn't have to think of it, we need to make sure that animals are really well hydrated, right? Really well hydrated. Lots of good water. Now, how do we do this in captivity? So we're going to bring the animals inside. How do we give them everything they need? Well, typically we put them in a cage like this. We have a heat basking light and we have a UV light. So what do? Well, we get our insects, right? Our commercially grown insects. We dust them with calcium or a multivitamin calcium powder. Here we go. So calcium powders, very fine, dust on the food item. The animals eat it and they get the calcium in their body, right? How easy is that? They eat it, it goes straight into their gut. That's cool, right? Very cool. Now the next thing we're going to do is we need to get the UV into them. So we need to make sure this is getting into them. So we want to make sure the UV is getting into them. So basically we put the UV in the cage, we give the animal ample opportunity, in other words basking spots. They're up near the heat and you put the UV side by side near the heat, then the animal basks for the heat and gets the radiation from the UV, right? So that UV light comes down, goes into the skin of the animal, right? Very bad for humans, really good for reptiles, UV light, especially the UVBs, really good. So it goes into the skin of the reptiles. Now what does the reptile do? Well, the skin of the reptile then creates it into a pre-vitamin D. So it's not finally vitamin D, it turns into a pre-vitamin D. Now with that pre-vitamin D that's absorbed through the skin, it also needs the heat. So therefore we've got the heat radiating right next to the UV output, right? So the heat radiates, the UVB radiates into the skin, which creates pre-vitamin D. We need that heat to unlock it into the next stage. So then it's converted into pre-vitamin D and it turns into vitamin D3. So it's a pre-vitamin D3. That gets shot off to the liver, right? So the liver, boom, goes into the liver. The liver converts it into vitamin D3, converts it into calcividido. Now, I've probably got the word wrong, but calcividido, that goes into the kidneys. Now, here again, this is where hydration is very important. You can imagine the calcium, well, the calcifido going into the kidneys, battering the kidneys. Now, if we're not fully hydrated enough, you'll see it with some animals that aren't hydrated and getting smashed with all this UV light and all this calcium powder. They'll end up with this thing called gout. So basically what happens is the joints of the animals, typically all that soft tissue starts to calcify and we get crystals building up, and of course it's very painful, stops the animal from moving, and we got a little grumpy bum here. So that can happen, but we need to make sure they're really hydrated. So then the kidney converts calcifido into calcitrol, right? Calcitrol, big words, right? The calcitrol then goes and promotes calcium absorption through the gut. So there again, this is where it all ties in. So remember we said calcium, dusting the food, animal eats it, goes into their belly. Animal goes up, basks under the UV light and the heat source at the same time. Now that allows the UV light to be absorbed into the skin, turns it into pre-vitamin D basically. It got shot off into basically through the liver, turns into calcifidol that goes into the kidneys, gets turned into calcitrol, and then goes back, and because of the kidneys work with the stomach, it helps absorb the calcium more efficiently. Wow, that's a big mouthful, right? Now, how can we make that happen? Well, it's very simple, guys. You need to dust your food, give them access to awesome heat, that's the preferred body temperature. Now remember, monitors, some monitors, just like this guy, the Spencer's monitor, do prefer temperatures of 45 to 60 degrees Celsius. That's right, there's such a wide temperature range. Why? Because 40 degrees is sort of average temperature where you keep the animal and it will survive. 60 to 65 is what its typical maximum basking temperature is. So in other words, he'll have a feed, then he'll want to get really hot at that 65 degrees, access to the UV light, and you can understand what's going to happen here. All that stuff's going to get absorbed into the stomach, turns into great, big, strong, healthy bones to create a big, strong animal, just like Grumpy Bum here, the Spencer's monitor. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. I know this guy didn't mind too much until we get towards the end where it got a little bit crazy with a lot of words. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Make sure you give it a like, and thank you so much for watching CrittaCam. We always appreciate you watching, and thank you so much for your support. And if you want, you can always hit me up on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching CrittaCam.